This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Chapter 3 of How to Learn Anything Faster, where we're diving into spaced repetition, the surprisingly simple memory trick that can make information stick in your brain like glue. We'll explore why reviewing things at just the right intervals can transform you from someone who forgets names 5 seconds after hearing them into a memory machine. Let's get into it. Your brain is quietly deleting most of what you learned today, not because it's broken, because it's efficient. A month from now, you'll remember a few highlights and almost none of the details. Yet some people lock in those details forever, without studying more. How? So if your brain is quietly pruning most of today's input, the real question isn't, how do I remember more, but which few things deserve to survive? That's where spaced repetition stops being a study hack and becomes a filter. Instead of rereading notes until they blur, you decide, up front, what's truly worth keeping. That programming pattern you always forget? Those key phrases in a new language? The core formulas behind a new framework? Then, instead of fighting your forgetting, you schedule tiny check-ins right before things would normally fade. Each review is short, targeted, and slightly challenging, more like tuning a guitar than rebuilding it. Done right, the hard part isn't the review itself, it's being deliberate about what goes into your system. In this episode, we'll turn spaced repetition from an app on your phone into a strategy for curating your future knowledge. So how do you actually live with this system day to day without turning your life into a spreadsheet? The trick is to attach it to things you already do. Developers often hook their cards to real bugs they've fixed, writers to edits an editor requested, language learners to phrases they've just used in a real conversation. Instead of hoarding every fact, you note only the moments where your brain stumbled or hesitated. That hesitation is gold. It tells you the item is important and fragile. Those are the pieces you promote into your spaced repetition queue. Here's where spaced repetition gets interesting. The power isn't just in when you see something again, but what form it takes each time. If every review looks identical, your brain learns the card, not the underlying idea. Change the angle slightly, and you're training flexible knowledge instead of fragile trivia. That's why effective systems rarely stick to plain front-back facts. A single concept might appear as a code snippet to debug, a short scenario, and a one-line definition spread across different cards. The point isn't volume, it's coverage. You're mapping the same idea onto multiple cues so you can reach it from more than one mental doorway. Research on transfer backs this up. People who practice recalling ideas in varied ways are much better at using them in new contexts. So if you're learning an API, you might have one card that asks you to predict the output, another that asks which function belongs in a given use case, and a third that asks what goes wrong if you misuse it. Same core knowledge, 3 access routes. This is also where the line between rote and conceptual learning starts to blur. Yes, there are classic one-fact items, vocabulary, formulas, command flags. But you can also encode micro-explanations. Why does this algorithm outperform that one on large inputs? Or tiny procedures, steps to safely roll back a failed deploy. The goal is to compress each card into the smallest prompt that still reliably reconstructs the idea in your head. One practical rule: each card should test a single mental move. If a card requires 3 or 4 steps, it becomes hard to grade yourself honestly. You'll half remember, half guess, and the signal to your system gets noisy. Splitting that big card into smaller ones feels slower, but it dramatically sharpens feedback. You immediately see which link in the chain is weak. Think of a good spaced repetition collection less as a notebook and more as a set of tiny, reusable exercises, short drills that, taken together, let you improvise when real problems appear. Think about how a jazz pianist practices. They don't just memorize a scale once and call it done. They loop tricky transitions, reharmonize the same melody, and test themselves by soloing in odd keys. You can treat your spaced items the same way, not as static notes, but as riffs you'll need to play under pressure. Concrete example. Say you're learning Kubernetes. One card might flash a small YAML snippet and ask, "What's wrong here?" Another could show a short incident summary and prompt, "Which object would you inspect first?" A third card might be a one-sentence constraint. "You need zero downtime. What rollout strategy fits?" Same domain, different angles.
Language learning? Instead of 10 synonyms on one side and translations on the other, you might keep one card with a short dialogue missing a key phrase, one that asks, "How would you politely say this?" One that gives you a situation. "You're at customs, ask this question." Soon, your calendar might feel less like a meeting graveyard and more like a smart coach, nudging you to revisit one shell command right after a deployment, surfacing a security rule just before you touch production data, or slipping a 3-line recap into your commute. Tools could stitch review into the edges of your day, during CI waits, app builds, or snack breaks, so studying becomes an invisible layer that quietly keeps your skills sharp while you just do your job. Let this be a sandbox, not a syllabus. You can feed it half-baked ideas, draft architectures, even mistakes, then watch which ones keep resurfacing. Over time, patterns emerge, like a playlist that quietly promotes the tracks you actually replay. Your challenge this week: pick one skill, add just 5 tiny cards, and see which ones still matter in a month. This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. This series continues with more chapters on OwlUp.co. Visit OwlUp.co to access the complete course and continue your learning journey. See you there!